brought it in from the Champion South Africa project that I head up is to find champion stories. And you can have this debate about whether there's a typical champion story, but it's certainly a story that is the making of a champion. I'm talking about Elon Musk, who now in effect is the single largest investor in Twitter, of all places. What do we make of all of that? Let's find out from Arthur Goldstuck from Worldwide Works. Arthur, good chatting to you, and thanks for your time.
Good to be chatting, Ashraf.
Yeah. So what do you make of this acquisition, firstly? If I can call it that.
It's a fascinating acquisition because, as people may well know, Elon Musk loves Twitter, or at least he loves tweeting. And when he tweets, the world listens. If he says he's going to invest in a particular company, everyone piles into that company. Or cryptocurrency. When he first said he's investing in one of the cryptocurrencies, it shot through the roof. And every time he tweets something positive about any of the cryptos, they suddenly leap in value. And that's exactly what happened when he announced this week that he had taken a 9.2% stake in Twitter. It cost him about between $2.5 and $3 billion. But the share price of Twitter jumped 26% on that announcement. So significant is his voice in driving sentiment. So if it was purely aimed at making money, he surely did overnight around $700 million in profits from that stake if you were to sell it immediately. But he's not known for what they call pump and dump. So the idea wasn't to just buy the shares, see them go up in value, and then sell them again. His real motive seems to be able to play a role in driving the Twitter agenda. About a month ago, he asked his followers, and bear in mind, he has around 18 million followers on Twitter. Yeah, he asked them whether they think that Twitter adheres to free speech. And more than 2/3 of them said no, they don't. And he suggested that maybe a new platform was needed for social media commentary. But it seems that he's given that a little more thought, and he's decided that actually, best of all, would be to own a little bit of this platform. So he's bought 9.2%, which is just enough to get him a guaranteed seat on the board of Twitter. So suddenly he will have influence on the strategic direction of Twitter. He can't control it with a 9%, but he has a seat on the board, and he certainly is going to be an even more influential voice on Twitter. There's a further aspect of it, a little almost Machiavellian aspect of it. With that shareholding and with a seat on the board, he is entitled to having a view of any legal proceedings in which Twitter is involved. He can see the documents that are being served on Twitter, but also Twitter's response to those documents. So any individual who is challenging Twitter suddenly is also making their challenge visible to Elon Musk.
Okay, I mean, there's so many things to come out of that. So one is the fact that, I mean, he's the world's richest man, so he's got the money, right? And he's got bigger dreams, like, you know, setting up a whole colony out of this world, literally speaking, which is another conversation completely. But with regard to Twitter, do you think, keeping in mind his tweet of a month back, that in fact this is it? It is that he will actually influence Twitter to be even more open in terms of freedom of speech or expression than it currently is?
I think that is part of his intention, is to try and influence it to be more open. But, you know, he's such an interesting and complex character that it seemed almost too obvious that would be his intention, that it's simply to enforce greater corporate governance. I do think that because of the impact that his tweets have, he understands how powerful Twitter is and how powerful it can be, and probably believes that the people currently running Twitter don't actually appreciate their own power or the potential of the platform to become a powerhouse in social media beyond anything that it currently is.
I think that's probably the most interesting one, is it? I mean, someone like myself who certainly uses Twitter very often, but is aware that Instagram and Facebook and TikTok clearly has bigger followings, bigger revenue, and Twitter appears to have sort of plateaued, excepting for people like us who are news junkies and news trolls as well. So you're quite right. He probably sees something much bigger for this platform, and they don't fully appreciate it themselves at this point in time.
No question. If you look at the market capitalization of Twitter, it's $40 billion. You look at Facebook, it's somewhere between 900 billion and $1 trillion. And he probably feels that Twitter is actually more powerful than Facebook. So Twitter needs to actually ramp up its offering, up its game to really achieve its potential value. He's certainly shown what he can do with Tesla, and he has shot the lights out and proven everyone wrong with regard to Tesla, and probably all his other investments as well. And I think that Twitter is next on the agenda for him to see what he can actually achieve with an underperforming asset.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm sort of expecting him to set up a Twitter space, considering that's a space I've used often. I'm thinking Twitter's done that in the last couple of weeks with some of their big industry players. I'm expecting him to do that pretty soon. What does it say, Arthur, therefore, just to end up, in terms of I use the word, champion stories. I mean, do you see this as a champion story, as someone who's done something that you may or may not agree with, but is quite remarkable in terms of being this pioneer and incredibly innovative and pushing boundaries all of the time?
It's certainly a champion story if it plays out the way people would like to see, in terms of the environmental and societal goals that he is expressing in terms of what Twitter should be doing. His lip service suggests that he wants Twitter to become a greater force for good. And if that pans out, then certainly it's a great champion story.
And he's got 76 million voters, let's put it that way. And I'm using that word very deliberately in terms of his followers. So there we are. Arthur Goldstuck, is always great chatting to you. And feel free to send some links as well. Post it even now. I'll gladly share that, okay? From Worldwide Words, the CEO, Arthur Goldstuck. You can follow him on Twitter at Art2G, the number 2. There we are. Right, let's talk about, we're going to end up by looking at a fascinating feature that we've had so far around some of the most significant mosques in South Africa. Not just necessarily the oldest, but the most significant, historical and significant. We'll talk about the Grey Street Mosque to wrap up with in a moment.